Baruch atah Bashem Yahuwah. The call of the shofar to go forth, find the lost seed of Abraham scattered all across this earth, that they might hear his spirit, hear his call, and come to him. It's the formation of Yasharel. Welcome, brothers and sisters. I'm MarthAH with the original scriptures, the restoration of the greatest nation in history. I want to tell you on this video clip an amazing story that especially you Americans might be interested in, and it's not written anywhere in history that I've been able to find, but I've dug it out of primary history, that is out of letters, and there's a reason why that you haven't heard about it before, but it's also interesting to the entire world, and particularly to the restoration of Yasharel, because you can see the hand of Yahuwah involved in this. Have you ever wondered why the Holy Bible isn't quoted in the U.S. Constitution when about 90% of the American people, even back then, respected it? Not a single verse. You know why? Because the Holy Bible is not of Yahuwah. It's not of God. It's of Satan. The Constitution of the United States of America was the end of the empire religions. It was the beginning of freedom of religion, which is what specifically Yahuwah wants for all people to have. He doesn't want to cram down your throat any particular faith, even his own word. Why? Because he wants living sons and daughters in freedom coming to love him. Well, we barbarians will die for your choice. 1776, I want to tell you an amazing story. My great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother happened to be the first servant of the Carolina Native Americans. Her name was Atakulakula. And some of you might have heard about her uncle, who was called Atakulakula of the Cherokees. But that's not totally true, because he was on loan to the Cherokees, but his real tribe was the Carolina. Now, the reason you haven't heard of the Carolina before is because they all got wiped out by President Andrew Jackson and the American Army in the 1830s, because they wouldn't give in to the Indian Relocation Act and go on the Trail of Tears and leave their native land. They fought till they died, and that's what they did, is they died. And it was such a horrible genocide, even involving the children down to the 12-year-olds, that Andrew Jackson made it against the law for them even to publish the history of it. They put in jail anybody, any editor who put the history of the Carolinas and of the genocide against the barbarians. That's who they call themselves, barbarians, because that means bar means like Bar Jonah, son. Bari means sons. Barbarians mean sons of the son of Yah. Who's Yah? Well, Yah is the God that's against the Lord God. Yah is the one that never murders. He never enslaves. He is totally against polygamy, totally against sex slavery. So totally against the belittlement of women and the abuse of children. He is totally against stealing. He is against the divine right of kings. And he is for the equality of all men and women to live in freedom with their families in harmony. That's Yah in short form. And he's also the one who's not going to force you in this age to accept any religion. He gives you guides that you have to go and seek to find. Now, 7 of them are written in your heart. You know, the first one of which is that he is a God of freedom, and he made you to be free. Live free or die fighting. The Carolinas were famous for this. they would never surrender. They were nice. They were hospitable. They actually leased half of their lands to the invaders from Europe that came over, the Christians. And they expected that the Christians would act responsibly, pay them the lease for their land. They were willing to share. They even shared their food. They shared their clothes for them. They shared with them the treks up into the mountains. They were not a selfish people at all. They welcomed the foreigners, like Yasseril always has. But then the Christians decided, well, we don't want to lease this land, and we want to own it. And so then the conflict of the 1830s happened when they said, we want this land. We're going to send y'all off, and we're going to take your land. These were Christian people, by the way, that did this. Andrew Jackson was known as being a responsible Christian. But you see, Christianity allows you to steal the land of the pagans in their viewpoint. You don't have to treat unbelievers the same. You can kill them. That's Deuteronomy 13. Also Leviticus 19 and other places. This is an interesting story, though. So, 1776, this was before the extermination, genocide of 1830. 1776, my great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother went to Washington and became a friend purposely with Martha Washington. She wanted to talk to George Washington because he was obviously the rising spokesman for the American colonies, of which the Carolinas agreed with, against the British because they had slaves and they had kings and royalty and all this stuff that the barbarians hated. Well, George wouldn't listen to it because these were natives, primitives, barbarians. He wouldn't want to listen to it. He was worried about getting up an army to fight the British with. Martha did. Martha was a true intellectual. And she was also a true American. And she listened. And the more she listened, the more she got convicted against the Holy Bible and against Christianity and towards adopting the faith of her new friend, Atakulakulia. Then one day Martha broke down in tears, repented of following the God of Europe and the Holy Bible, and accepted Yahuwah. She became a Yadi, a follower of Yah. George Washington was horrified. Martha, my beloved wife, how in the world can you reject our Christianity and adopt the pagan religion of these primitive natives, these barbarians? How can you do that, Martha? And so there was a lot of conflict between them. But still, Martha began to rub off on him. She rubbed off on a lot of the early American founders, people like Thomas Jefferson, people like Benjamin Franklin, people like John Adams. She would host parties for him come, and then she would talk to him about the slavery issue. She would talk to him about all men are created equal. She would talk to him about why are we following this pagan religion of Europe. A lot of people didn't like it, but she made a lot of sense to our American founders. Well, George apologized over and over again. Sorry about my wife. She's gone off the deep end. She's gotten into this pagan native religion. Don't pay any attention to her. Now, Martha and George agreed on one thing: the freedom of America. And so they pledged each other there at Mount Vernon that they would either have victory or they would die fighting. That is the first commandment. It agreed wholeheartedly with Martha's new faith. Live free or die fighting. And so they made a covenant together. George got up his army. July 4th, the Constitution was announced. The war began. First battle at Bunker Hill. George Washington had 20,000, mainly farmers, that showed up to fight against 40,000 British. The American side lost 9,000 men. almost 40%, over 40% of its forces. And then in the next 12 battles, they lost every one of them. Bam, 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 until they got down to 1,000 men. That's all they had left. Started off with 20,000, now they're down to 1,000. 95% of the Revolutionary Army killed or run off or wounded. Half of the 1,000 that were left didn't have shoes. It was December 25th, 1776. At a place called Trenton, New Jersey, right on the sides of the Delaware River. Across the river were 40,000 of the best troops in the world, never been beaten. Remember, the British Empire had never been beaten. They just won 13 battles in a row, destroyed 95% of this upstart United States Army. The generals for George Washington said, "We're sorry, General, but it's over." Look around. We've lost this one. Maybe 10 years or something we can try again, but we have lost this one. It's time to send the men home. It's time to hide our identities. And sorry, General, you're probably going to get caught and get hung. Maybe if you surrender, they'll let you live. George was a prudent man. He wasn't an idiot. He could see the handwriting on the wall. Interesting enough, Martha had told him, "George, you're not going to prevail as long as you are a Christian, as long as you are establishing the same empire religion that we left Europe for, and all of its abuses. You're not going to be blessed." December 25th, the birthday of Zeus. The British were over there celebrating the birthday of Zeus. And in comes Martha Washington and my great-great-great-great-grandmother, Atakulakula. Martha came up, kissed him on the cheek, said, "Hi, honey. I told you we weren't going to have the favor of God as long as you're following a pagan religion. This is America. We need to follow the original faith that was established and was left unadulterated here in America. The one that the Carolina Native Americans have brought to us. The one that was originally established with Abraham, with Isaac and Jacob. Martha had done her study. She said, "Honey, it's time that you repented from that pagan religion and you came to the true God of our ancestors, the God of freedom." George's generals had already quit. Most of that 1,000 men left pretty much lost heart. He didn't have anything to lose, except Martha reminded him, "Honey, we made a pact that we were going to live free or die fighting. This war is not over yet as long as you and I and Atakulakula are alive." And then she said one of the greatest lines in American history. When I read this, I literally just fell on the floor weeping. It was so amazing. She said, "Honey, my sister Atakulakula and I are going to attack the enemy, the foreigner who has invaded our land, taking our rights, trying to take our freedom. You coming, honey?" Are you coming, honey? You see, the history books will never say that it was a woman, two women actually, two grandmothers actually, who won the Revolutionary War, but that's the truth. Because they had faith in Yah. And they started walking out. George said, wait, Martha, wait. Martha, I love you. If you're going to die, let's die together. You're right. So George Washington became a believer in Yah. Next time that you look or hear of the name of the great southern state, Georgia, you'll think of this story. Because that day, on Christmas Day, 1776, George the Christian became George of Yah, Georgia. And he joined his wife and his wife's new friend. And he gave opportunity for 1,000 American soldiers to go home if they wanted to, which would have been the smart thing, the intelligent thing. But he allowed Martha to tell him about Yah, tell him about the freedom that he wanted for America. And how that now Almighty Yah and his power would be with us. And from what I've been able to find out, every single American who could walk followed him. Everyone. I'm sure a lot of them didn't know much about following Yah at that point, but what they did is they recognized the Spirit of God that was speaking to their hearts. They lost all their cannon crossing the river, frozen river. As you know the story well, it was in the middle of a blizzard. Their feet, you could track them by the blood in the snow. You know why they lost all their cannon? So nobody would ever say it was because of the weapons that we had. The British had much better weapons. They had their cannon. They had modern rifles. The Americans just had their squirrel guns. But they were led by the Spirit of Yahuwah, and they were led by the people of Yah. And they won the first victory. A victory that should never have been won. A battle that they should have been wiped out in. Just like the barbarians down through history, again and again, they should have been wiped out. They should have been wiped out when Gideon attacked with 300. They should have been wiped out when Abraham went with 318 against 5 kings. They should have been wiped out when David, a young believer in Yah, because he studied the scriptures, went up against the giant Goliath. They should have been wiped out when they went up against to get their land back. Not to take the land of the Hittites and the Amorites, but to take their land back that their forefathers had earned. And that's what we're doing here in America. We're taking Yah's land back. Our land back. Native Americans, imported Americans, Chinese Americans, Dutch Americans, French Americans, Italian Americans, Middle East Americans, Russian Americans, Ukraine Americans, you name it. We're going to join together as true Americans and take our land back. George Washington and Martha and Atakula Kulia and a couple of thousand Carolina Native Americans that the history books have written out attacked the British, and they won. And they never lost a battle after that. Never lost. What that means is America has never lost a battle as true America. True America originally was spelled with an AH on the end of it. The same AH that was put in Abram's name to make it Abraham. A covenant people, a covenant nation, a nation of love. That's what it means. Ahabiyah, the love of Yah. That's who we are. That's who we're going back to. And all of the demons of hell put together cannot stop us now. Yasserel has returned. Welcome to the new America.